John Moyers already leaning back. Look, we got to get his arms ready. All this stuff. Let's put this like this. I don't think I'll cut any of that, actually. I think I want that on tape.
Okay.
I have John Moyers, not only a great artist, but a good friend. And John is here for a show that we're doing, an homage to Maynard Dixon. We had that last night, the opening, and we're both exhausted, but we said, John was kind enough, said, I'll come in and talk. John, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, we're done, John. Is that all you needed? So John Moyers and I have a lot in common. One of the things is that we both grew up in New Mexico, but he grew up in a big city, real big city, Albuquerque, and I grew up in Portales. Now, you started in grade school in Albuquerque?
Yeah, I went to all my school was in Albuquerque up until I graduated from high school.
And so your dad was a pretty famous guy. Right?
Yeah, he was a Western artist, and he was pretty well known in the day. So.
Yeah, William Moyers.
Yeah.
It is early, I must admit. I didn't get that second cup of coffee yet. So when did you recognize, because your dad, I'm sure, was always doing stuff. He was always out there doing things. But when did you recognize your own artistic creativity, that you wanted to kind of do the same thing that maybe your dad was doing, or maybe not? I don't know.
I always kind of did. I always wanted to be an artist, and because that was the one thing that I could do that came kind of easy to me as far as being able to excel at it. So I just gravitated towards art. So.
And do you remember when you started doing that? I mean, were you like 4, 5, 6?
I always had. My dad always let any of the kids have access to any of the materials in his studio. So I always was drawing and painting. And, yeah.
And oil paints too, even at that time?
No, watercolors and indie ink, a lot of ink stuff, and which is a good foundation for any artist because if anything, all that stuff's more unforgiving and more difficult than oil paint. So it's a good foundation. So.
Yeah, and your gouaches are they've won national awards.
Yeah, I've been lucky. So
yeah, lucky. Yeah, hard work.
Yeah.
And what was your dad's? Did he give you encouragement and said, "Yeah, kid, you're doing,"
Yeah, to a degree, he wasn't. He was kind of old-fashioned, I guess you'd say. Like it was not like we've encouraged our son. Let's put it that way. But he encouraged me for sure, but kind of in a different way. So
yeah, in what way was that?
It wasn't like, way to go, kid. You're great. You're awesome. Da 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 da. So it was more like, like I say, it was more old-fashioned. Way of raising a kid.
There's a story right there. I haven't quite pulled it out.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know yet. So.
You're still trying to figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
Did you win any awards or anything for your art early on?
Oh, like at the New Mexico State Fair and stuff, and high school stuff, but nothing national or anything.
But when you won, so you entered in the state fair, and when did you start entering? How old were you when you doing that?
Gosh, I don't know. We used to enter every year stuff in the state fair when we were kids. Like sometimes I put some of my arrowheads in there that I'd found and won some ribbons for that, or sometimes art or just whatever, And
do you think that was when you won those? What did that do? Did that say, yeah, maybe I am good enough?
Well, I don't know. It was just more about the moment. I don't know. It was. I just always did the art. I don't think any of that kind of stuff changed or encouraged me to do it more than anything else.
You still have the ribbons?
No.
No?
I don't have any of that stuff.
Yeah? Where did they go?
I don't know. I went off to art school and a lot of stuff disappeared,
Yeah.
So.
Now, your dad was part of the CAs, right?
Yeah, he was I think he got into the CA in I believe it was 1967, and I think, or maybe, well, 66, 67. I think his first show was either in 67 or 68. I can't remember for
And
sure.
so, for people who don't know what that is, it's the Cowboy Artists of America,
Mhm.
right? And,
Yeah.
and when were they founded?
They were founded in, oh my gosh, it's like, I think they originally,
66 or 65?
I think they originally thought of the idea like in 64 or 5, and then I think the show was up and going by 66.
So he was one of the very
Yeah,
earliest
he
members.
was one of the early guys.
And what
yeah.
was that CA like then? Do you remember? Or your
Oh,
dad?
I think it was really neat. I think it was a neat idea. And, back then, Western art wasn't this huge, I don't know, you can almost say industry. It wasn't, it was just a few guys. You could count on two hands all the guys doing Western art in in 1965. There's just very few guys, and so they all, kind of gravitated toward being in the CA, I think it was more about the idea and promoting the West and everything more than how much money can we make.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, and I think ultimately that's going to be the downfall of a lot of things going on today, is like it's become how much money can we make
Off the art, and not so
yeah.
much about the history
and so like
and the culture.
Yeah, and I hate to be critical, but it's like there's back then, even up until like the 1990s and stuff, like when you did Western art, whether you did Native Americans or Mexicans or cowboys or whatever, like you had to do your research and it had to be authentic, and you, like, if you painted a certain tribe, you had to do the right hairstyle and the right clothes and everything. But now I'm seeing stuff that's it's just become kind of generic. Like there's stuff wrong, the gear, like the tack on the horses is wrong, it's just become generic stuff, and it's ultimately everything has a point where it starts going downhill, and I kind of think Western art in some cases is gotten too big, so.
Did your dad, would he encourage you to say, okay, kid, you got to get this right?
Oh yeah, he was very, I mean, back then everybody was, because even the collectors, a lot of those collectors grew up on farms and ranches and grew up in the West, and they knew when something was wrong. So,
Yeah. Did your dad know his way around a horse? Did he do
Oh
all-
yeah, he grew up with horses, and he was actually a cowboy in around the Alamosa area.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Did is that where he grew up?
Mm-hmm.
In Alamosa?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Or near there.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Coldest place on earth.
Yep.
Yeah, but also the most beautiful place on earth.
Yeah, it's pretty there. Yep.
And so he was he grew up in a ranching community, and
Yeah, he grew up on a ranch there, and and that's what he did, and he put himself through college with rodeo money, and so.
and he was obviously competing in rodeo. Like,
Yeah.
And did he go to the national finals or any of that?
No, it was back then. That was because my dad was born in 1960, and so
Yeah.
no, he didn't. It was more just local stuff, local rodeos. They would, go around that area, and there was always rodeos going on. So no, not in the scale of what it is today. So,
And when did he go into art?
he was kind of like me. He was growing up. He always wanted to be an artist. So yeah.
Did he understand at some point that you eclipsed him as far as, and you may not think he did, but eclipsed him as far as fame and notoriety and
Oh, I don't know about
collectability?
that. I don't think that was a concern of his or a concern of mine either. It's just like I always say, it's Terri, my wife, and I always say that all we want to do is keep making enough money to do what we're doing. So to me and him, I don't think it's all about fame or making money. It's more about just doing what we want to do, and I mean, if I and my dad too, if we wanted to do it for the money and fame, we probably would redesign everything we're doing, because it's like, it's sometimes it doesn't work out too well. So.
But he got to see it though too. He got to see all your accomplishments.
Yeah.
Now those old guys that are not longer with us, the CA guys, did you get to know any of the the Bealers really well, or any of those that might have influenced you?
I knew most of those guys because I grew up with them.
Right? Did you ever go on those camp trails and things?
Yeah, my dad took us on, or my brother and I, and sometimes just me, on some of the Cowboy Artist trail rides and stuff when I was a teenager and stuff. So, I was around a lot of those guys for years. So.
Were any of them, would you consider, influential in what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. They all were, in a way, in various ways. But my dad, when I think I was about 16, my dad took me up to Robert Lougheed's studio up in Santa Fe and asked Lougheed if he would help me with my painting. So that was a real turning point for me.
And so your dad clearly saw you had something enough to take you up to Lougheed's studio.
Yeah, well, Lougheed was a really good teacher, and he taught a lot of artists that are, a lot of artists are still influenced by him today, but he had a whole different approach to painting that my dad recognized that was probably better for me. So one of them being working from life. And so, that whole generation of Western artists that were, a lot of those early CA guys, they, most of that stuff was done out of their head. So, Lougheed was really pushed the whole idea of working from life and not making stuff up. So.
And using live models models and things
models, like that. Live models, painting. If you're going to do a landscape, paint it from life, or do a sketch from life and bring it back to your studio and do it properly. So, because cameras are better nowadays, but back then they weren't that good. They lie to you, and they still lie to you. So
that's really when you started working plein air and painting outside. Was it when you were about 16?
Yeah, 16, and then I started. I went out to paint as much as I could, and then I went to art school and I did as much life drawing as I could. So. And
do you think that was one of the reasons who you are, is because of that mentorship between Lougheed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's still a big influence. So.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting how that does? Yeah, I can see that in your paintings, and I love Lougheed's work as well.
Yeah.
And so I know you don't want to talk about it, but let's talk about being a basketball star.
No, that's another reason I became an artist, because I wasn't a basketball star. So. But I enjoyed it.
Did you guys win state championship?
We won state,
Well, then that kind of, I don't know, that does work a little bit.
Yeah. But of course, every kid growing up, you think, I'm going to play in the NBA, but usually it doesn't work out.
Is there a point where you go, because you guys do win state, you are a good basketball player, even though I've seen your shots not as good as it used to be, but oh, you think it is, huh?
No, it's not. That's why I'm laughing.
Well, okay. But at that point in high school, did you go, maybe I should go and try to get on a basketball scholarship and that kind of stuff?
Well, like I say, of course, everybody playing high school basketball would love to do that, but it's not in the cards for all of us.
So you realized even when you graduated, I got to go and do it.
It was fun. It was fun. But I, even by the time I was a senior in high school, it's like basketball was fun, but I wanted to be an artist. So.
Yeah. And now you were the youngest?
Yeah.
And so your brother, how old is he?
I have a brother that's 2 years older than me, and a brother that I think is 4 years older, 5 years older than me, and a sister that's 7 years older.
So the oldest brother, he was in that Vietnam era.
Yeah, he was, right. He was, the Vietnam War stopped like I don't know, a
72,
few months
73.
before he would have been eligible for the draft.
Yeah, so he didn't. He had to go through a little bit of the angst, but didn't actually have to.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't, you know, yeah, I was I was a lot younger then, and I didn't care what he was going through. but anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so it was there.
Yeah.
So you decided right then you're going to, and somewhere in high school, I'm going to go to art school.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do.
And how did you determine where to go?
I had some options. They were creating this kind of new art department up at Adams State College in Alamosa, and they offered me a full scholarship. And then I got offered a scholarship from Cal Arts. And then so I had these options, and I, you know, even though it was scary, I wanted to go to a real art school in California. So I kindly declined the offer from Adams State. But so I went to California.
So to get those scholarships, because the academics might not have been your forte, but you obviously were doing something to get people's attention to give you a scholarship.
I actually, believe it or not, I actually did get pretty good grades in high school.
You always play it like you didn't. Okay, here's the real truth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I did.
Okay, all right.
But I, you know, you send in portfolios of drawings.
So they could see it.
Yeah, and so that's you know, I think the combination of the two, so...
And so where did you go to school?
Well, the first year I had an opportunity, and it was really good. You know, it was my choice, but I had an opportunity to live with a man named Noel Tucker in Laguna Hills, California. And he said, why don't you come live out here, get used to California, and then you can and go to Laguna Beach School of Art and then do a year there and then go up to Cal Arts. So that's what I did. And so they saved that scholarship for me. And then after like the first quarter at Laguna Beach School of Art, they gave me a full scholarship. So my parents, you know, they didn't have to pay for too much. So anyway, so then I was there for a year, and then I went up to Cal Arts.
Was Noel Tucker an artist?
Yeah, he was an artist. He worked at Disney for years. He was one of the early guys at Disney. And he was also one of my dad's art teachers when my dad was young. So.
Oh yeah, so he was an older guy, but he had been around.
Yeah, he went to the Chicago Art Institute, and he was a very talented artist. But he came along when, you know, it was hard to sell representational art, you know, and everything was going to the contemporary, and all these guys like Dixon and the California guys and stuff were really struggling at that point because of the Depression, and people didn't want that kind of art anymore. So he came along during that time, so he had to teach and work at Disney and everything. So.
And he did animation?
Yeah, he did more, like he was head of the special effects department, and which all had to be animated. Now they do it all with computer, but so he was more into, like, he was a really good landscape painter and everything, but so he was more into the, you know, the not necessarily figures or animals, but mostly landscapes and like dripping water or whatever they needed for a movie.
Did you learn from him? Did you watch him or work with him?
Yeah,
or?
he helped me a lot. So.
In what way did he?
Oh, he set up still lifes for me to paint and go, like, help me with that. And yeah, so it was, you know, it's just all training your eye to see. Like, to be a good artist, you have to, ultimately, you have to be able or have the ability to paint what you want to paint. So by creating the situations, you know, it gives you the ability, you know, you can come up with great ideas, but if you don't have the ability to paint them, then what's the point?
And so a lot of that's composition then.
Everything. Drawing's so important. Yeah. Composition. It's just like
the whole skill set.
Yeah.
And so you stayed with Noel for a year?
A year. I was there for a year.
And then you went to Cal Arts?
Yeah.
And where is that? Where was that located?
That's up in Valencia,
Yeah, it's in
California,
Valencia.
which is at the north end of the San Fernando Valley.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And who were some of the artists that were at that school at that time?
So there
that
was,
we might
you know,
know?
because it was in the Disney animation program, there were a lot of guys there, like Tim Burton was there, and John Lassiter was there. And there's a bunch of guys there that went on to do great things. So.
Did you know any of those guys?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh. Would you know Tim?
No, I did. I saw him around.
Yeah,
all
or
the time.
John Lassiter?
He was like 2 years ahead of me, so I knew him, but not that well. So.
But at that point, they were no different than you, right?
Yeah, everybody's very talented. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody there was very talented. So, but they, you know, I was there to learn how to draw, and the reason because back then there weren't that many places teaching traditional drawing and design and all that, but Cal Arts was doing it, so that's why I wanted to go there.
Mm-hmm. And so you did that for how long?
I was just there a year, and then I had a chance to. Lougheed said, "Come back, study with me," and so I did that, and it was the best move I ever made. So.
And that was he was still in Santa Fe?
Yeah.
And how long so you came back, and how long did you do that?
Well, I came back in 70, the end of 78 or 79, I can't even remember. And then studied with him, and then he passed away in 1982. So it was, you know, but like I'm so glad I went back, because if I'd have missed that, I'd have been pretty sad. So.
And how many years did you work with him on this second go around?
Well, when I came back, from 79 to 82. So.
Oh, that whole time.
Yeah.
And did you?
I mean, off and on. I mean, it wasn't like I was in a studio
Sure.
every day, but you know, I would paint, go out and paint all these sketches and paint horses and whatever I could set up and paint. Then I'd take them to him, and he'd critique them for me.
Wow, what a great
and then we'd
person
go
to do that.
And then he invited me to go up and paint in Canada with him. And that's where I met Terri. So, yeah, it was a good time for me.
Kind of skipped out, and that's where I met Terri, and
Yeah.
your wife of many years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you were working with Lougheed, were you living in Albuquerque and commuting back and forth? Or
Yeah, I was. I was in Albuquerque, and I had a little apartment there. And yeah.
And were you collecting Indian art yet?
Oh, yeah. I've always been collecting stuff, buying and selling and trading, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you have a great love of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always said to people, John could have been a trader in the business of Native American art if he wanted to, just because you know so much about it.
Yeah.
People don't realize how important that is, I think, to your paintings too. Cause
it all, you know, it's all one big vicious cycle. But yeah, I think it all, like, all that stuff affects my painting. So
yeah, and you're very good. I think, like Dixon, you make sure everything's done properly.
I try to, and I'm sure I've made mistakes, but I try to do it right. So, yeah.
So you go to Canada to work with Lougheed, right?
Yeah.
And where do you go? Where are you painting?
We were painting at the Okanagan Game Farm in British Columbia.
And where did Terri come into this little?
So she was invited to paint there by a Canadian artist, Clarence Tillenius. So there was a group of artists, like really good group of artists, who would meet up there and paint for a month. And it was kind of cool, because it was before cell phones and computers and all the stuff that keeps you away from the easel. But you go up there for a month, and all you had to worry about was painting, like, you know, getting up and painting and going to bed and doing it again the next day. So.
And were you doing plein air painting?
Yep, everything was from life. Yeah.
And Lougheed was one of the instructors?
Well, it wasn't, at that point, it wasn't really, it was just a bunch of people painting, but because, you know, I'd been working with him, at the end of the day, he would go over my work with me. So, yeah, it wasn't like it was a structured workshop or something, but it was a really good, like I say, a really good time for me. So.
Yeah, you met Terri.
Yeah. Well, that, and I learned a lot. I
Yeah.
learned so much. So.
And so you met her there, and then you guys, well, that was kind of it. You fell in love right there.
Yeah, and then we got married in 1982. So yeah.
Yeah. And so how long after you met her did you guys get married?
So I met her in 79 and married in 82. So.
Yeah. So there was some kind
Well,
of,
she was from Calgary, so it was a long distance deal. But yeah, we eventually got married.
so you were going back and forth to Calgary and
Yeah, I was going up to Canada to paint a lot because I love painting up there. I still love painting up there, but and then she would come down, and it's like, yeah.
John's trying to skip over this part. Don't worry, folks. I'm going to interview Terri. We'll get the real
Yeah.
the real story.
Yeah, she'll have the dates better.
Yeah. You want to preface anything knowing that I'm going to interview your wife?
No,
Okay.
no.
I'll let Terri fill in the real details here.
Yeah.
So now you're married and are you living in Colorado or New Mexico?
In Albuquerque.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you're both trying to make it as an artist at that
Yeah,
point?
we had a little apartment in Albuquerque, and we had one little bedroom as a studio, so we're both painting in there, and then painting outdoors a lot. So with the combination of the two. So.
And how did you sell your art? I mean, because the plein air painting really isn't a thing yet, right?
No, but we're selling our art at the Taos Gallery up in Taos, and we're just flying by the seat of our pants, and sometimes it'd be a long time between selling a painting. It was a tough time, but
You do the flea market too, right?
yeah, we'd sell at the flea market every Saturday. We were in Albuquerque and Sunday in Santa Fe.
And what would you sell there?
Anything we can make money on.
So it'd be native arts, your paintings, her paintings?
No,
both?
we never
okay.
sold our work at the flea market. We always kept that separate.
And you
It
recognize.
was antiques, various kinds of antiques. We used to have a pretty big trade bead business going, so a lot of beads and yeah. So.
At any point did you go, maybe I should do this, sell antiques and Native American art?
No. I like the stuff, but I never liked selling the stuff as much as I like painting. So
yeah, or collecting it.
yeah. So but like we used to. I mean, one thing about being an artist is even to this day, there's a lot of times you don't know where the next check's coming from or if it's going to come. But we used to, when we were young, we used to. Take off for Canada to go painting for a month, and with all we had were maybe a couple $100 and a whole bag, a pillowcase full of beads, and we'd go up there and we would sell the beads in that stores up there, and then we would that would pay for our trip. But we always had it in the back of our mind, if we couldn't sell the beads, then we would have to turn around and come home. So
how did you learn all about trade beads?
No, I just learned about it. It was kind of a good it was like the glory days of trade beads. There's so many great beads coming in from Africa, and they're really reasonable. So you just had to educate yourself, because you might get look through 5,000 strings of beads, and there might be 2 great strings in that 5,000, and you need to know which ones those were, and those are the ones you get.
Could you pick those up from like the swap meet and things in Santa Fe from people that were bringing? Where do you find trade beads?
The African guys would be bringing in, like I say, thousands of strings of beads, and they'd call our house and say, I'm in town, and they'd come over to the house.
And so you'd buy those, and then those are what you would use to barter and trade, or when you go up to Canada?
Yeah, we'd take those, and we had like a kind of a little trap line of people that would always buy beads, so we would go to those people, and like the day after we arrived, that's the first thing we did, was try to sell the beads so we could paint for a month. So, so that's what I took.
Did you run out of trade beads at some point in time? And in other words, did it happen where you couldn't sell the beads and you did have to come back?
No, we always were lucky. Yeah, we were always lucky. So, yeah.
How many years did you do that?
Oh, I don't even remember, Mark. I mean, for several years.
You did that.
It's the lifestyle we chose was always a gamble, but it didn't never bothered me. I think it bothered Terri more than me. It's not knowing how you're gonna, pay for food the next day or whatever. But it's just the way it is.
And why didn't it bother you think?
I don't know. I think it's just. I think some people are cut out for that kind of lifestyle, and some people want everything like, like I get a check on Friday and where I couldn't live like that.
And you also saw your dad make it.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, and I'm sure that couldn't have hurt to know that he raised 4 kids and
yeah, and it's the one thing that you have to realize that there's really no shortage of money out there in the world. Like there's money. I mean, there's so much money out there. You just have to figure out how to make it.
Yeah.
So,
I talk a lot about your dad, but what about your mom? What did she do?
She was, a housewife, and she did all the books for my dad and stuff, but she was very supportive of my dad. So.
And of you, I assume?
Oh yeah, more than my dad was even. So
and encouraging you to go the route you went.
Yeah, I don't think she was a good mom. She just whatever any of the kids decided to do, she was definitely encouraging.
Yeah, so. I've seen you do that in your own son too.
Yeah.
Which is good. And when did you have a kid? So how long were you married before you had Josh?
I think we were married almost 10 years or 10 years.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then you had Josh.
Yeah.
And then did that change because you're 2 artists and you're going on all these trips where you paint and you have a wonderful time, but you're struggling clearly to make a living. Having a kid come into the world, did that affect or change things as far as you as an artist?
Not really. We just kept doing the same thing. We kept going to Canada and painting and dragging him with us. So he lived that lifestyle. So nothing really changed.
Yeah. And you didn't feel like there wasn't more pressure to have to make sales and that kind of stuff?
No, I mean, if anything, we weren't struggling as much then as we had been. So
yeah, you started. And when did that happen? So when did you get your first galleries? When did that happen?
Before we got married, we had galleries. So.
And which galleries were those? Do you remember?
Well, I was in Taos Gallery. I did some sculpting early on, which Taos Gallery handled I was like 12 or 13 years old. So I always...
They were handling your sculpture at 12 or 13 years old?
Yeah. So
what kind of sculpture?
Really bad sculpture.
Clearly, but you're 12, but not that bad.
Yeah, but no, it's just stuff I was doing, like wildlife and stuff. But
have you seen any of those come back on the market?
Yeah, once in a while they show up. Yeah.
Do you buy them?
I've bought some. Yeah.
Did you destroy them?
They should all be destroyed, but no, I have some somewhere in the box.
You have to show those to me when you go through your garage that you don't have.
But no, so anyway, so I was doing that. So I've always, and when I was in art school, I was in a gallery in California for a while. And so, yeah, I've always kind of, there's always galleries out there that'll take your work, you just have to find the ones.
Though I think it's easy to say that, but you have to have some chops to be able to get into even a mediocre gallery, because there's a lot of artists. Maybe it wasn't as hard quite.
Well, I think there's a lot more artists now than there were then, but it's just, yeah, I don't know. I think because of my dad and stuff and his name recognition that it was easier for me, to be perfectly honest. But so we're always in galleries.
Did you feel when you're growing up and you're going to these galleries now and you're showing your work, did you feel that you had to compete against those shoes? Because he was a big deal then.
Well, yeah, but I always I always wanted to, do. I wanted to do Western subject matter because that's what I wanted to do. That's what I was interested in. But I wanted to do it different than my dad. So, and he always said he didn't want to clone him, running around. So,
Especially if you might be better.
yeah. Well, no, I don't know. He could draw like a son of a gun.
He's a really good sculptor too.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And so how is yours different than his?
Well, I went to that. I went the working from life route, and where he was, working out of his head, and he was able to draw. Like I can draw, if you put it in front of me, I can draw it, but drawing out of my head, like I'm working on a painting now that's out of my head because it's the only way I can paint this picture, but it's way more difficult. Like I had to, it was a real struggle to get, and it's a big painting, but to get this drawn in, and I had to keep like adjusting and fixing stuff because I had nothing to refer to, where my dad and that whole school of painting, they could draw out of their head, and and that's something to be said because and that's that, my dad was influenced by Harvey Dunn, and all his, like, he really advocated working out of your head, because then Harvey Dunn felt that was the soul, like the soul of the artist, that being able to produce this art out of your head. So
and so this piece that you're working in your head now, is it just too complex to try to set it up in a way where you could?
Yeah, and at some point, I think that the more you use different aids to help you with your art, it sucks the art out of it, in my opinion. Like, so yeah, the more and more I learn is, maybe Harvey Dunn was right. Maybe the more you draw from yourself, maybe there is more art in that. So.
And when you do your paintings too, you draw right on the canvas, right?
Yep.
Yeah, tell me about that for people who might.
Well, we just both Terri and I hand draw everything. We don't use any mechanical aids, and yeah, so it's
so no projectors and that kind of stuff, right?
No.
You get a canvas, you put it on there.
Yeah.
You have an idea, or you may have taken some photographs of things that you might use as a reference.
We use photographs, or we'll photograph models and stuff, because it's just not practical in a lot of cases to have a model come back. We've done it, but to have a model come back every day for 5 days or something, but because they don't have the time, honestly, and we don't have the time, and so yes, we do use photographs to a degree, but usually if you look at the photograph and one of my finished paintings, like the photograph's just a start off point. I make all kinds, I edit stuff, I change stuff, and and I think that's where the art comes in.
Right, that's where you're going out of your head.
Yeah.
You have it there, you can see it, you understand the composition you set up to begin with, and then you look at that on kind of as a reference more for shape, color.
Yeah, I think
that type of thing.
It's Lougheed, as when we were students, he would he just did not want you working out of your head, and I understand that now, but sometimes you can make a decision where you depart from nature and it's a better piece of art, and sometimes you do that and it's a worse piece of art. Like, everything's a gamble. So yeah.
And so and back to when you guys are married and getting your first galleries going, what was your first kind of big gallery that you got? I guess it would have been in the mid 80s time frame, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. We've been in and out of so many galleries.
No shout outs to any that made a difference in your life? Good or bad? Because it can be good or bad.
Taos Gallery was, that was probably the gallery that really, where we really started getting our footing was David Shear up at Taos Gallery. But that changed. Everything changes, and they went on to do other things, and So then we had to scramble and do something else. So, every time you think you got it figured out and you start getting comfortable, then, life's going to throw you a curveball. That's for sure. So, especially in the art business.
It's a tough business, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and you do have to have some real business acumen, I think, as an artist to survive, don't you think?
You do, yeah. It's just common sense, So,
like not selling your paintings at the swap meet when you could.
Yeah, no, you don't do that.
Yeah, even when you're hungry.
Yeah.
So when did you get into the CA?
Got in 1994. Yeah, and then my first show was 95. Like you get in, and then it's a year before you show, and so that was a real turning point too.
Was that a goal for you to get into the CA?
Yeah, I always wanted to be a member of the CA, and it was, so when I got in, it was a real honor, and it was something that I wanted. So.
Was your dad there when you did your? Was he still in the CA at that point?
Yeah, he was.
Oh yeah, so that must have been really.
Yeah, it was exciting. That's for sure. Yeah.
Was that the first father-son?
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
Has there been anybody since then?
I don't think so, but I'm not sure. I don't think so. Yeah.
So you got in 94, and then you got to show in 95.
Yeah.
And when did you start winning awards?
Oh, I won. I hope my dates are right.
Yeah, close enough.
But I think I won gold medal oil and best of show, and I think it was 1998. So
3 years later.
Yeah.
And that was best of show. And how many best of shows did you win?
Quite a few, but I can't remember. But I did win quite a few, so I was lucky. So
yeah. Has anyone won more than you? Do you know?
I don't know.
You don't care?
Well, no. You know what? Awards are funny because at the time you really want them, but then you realize that in the whole scheme of things, they don't really mean all that much because they're more for the collectors than the artists. Because how can you go into a really high caliber art show and say this is the best piece of art in the show? It's all subjective, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But it's so it's fun and great and all that, but you could put a great Maynard Dixon in that same show and he wouldn't win an award. You just don't know, or Carl Rungus, so it's all subjective.
Yeah. So. Were there any years, because you're in the CA for, how many years were you in the CA for?
I left the CA in 2010, so whatever, 15 years.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah.
So was there any one where you won and you really were just completely shocked out of your boots?
Well, anytime you win anything, you're shocked because because there's, like I say, there's usually a lot of good art in those shows. So, so it's always an honor. But, and like I said, in the whole scheme of things, nobody really knows or cares 5 years later.
Now, there's a couple of paintings. Are any of those that won, or maybe even didn't win, but that really stand out that you thought really were super successful?
Well, that's a tough question, Mark, because it's hard. I can look at other artists' work and answer that question. It's so hard to judge your own work. So.
I remember that gouache, though, with the rattlesnake.
Yeah, that one was one best in show. Yeah,
that's the one I tried to buy out of your studio.
Yeah,
for myself.
Yeah.
I remember you said, "Well, I think this one's pretty good. I think I'll just go ahead and put it in."
Yeah, yeah. That painting's maybe the most popular painting I've ever done. People still talk about.
Yeah,
that.
tell us what it is visually.
It was a Mexican revolutionary guy, and he's down in this arroyo, and he's got his sword, and there's a big diamondback coiled up rattling, and head up like that, and he's teasing that rattlesnake with his sword, and I called it the eagle and the snake, so which is the Mexican flag, and Pancho Villa used to call his soldiers eagles, so I called it the eagle and the snake, and People love that painting. When when I did it, I thought nobody's going to buy a painting of a rattlesnake. Nobody,
Other than me.
and but it turned out to be very popular, and it won Best in Show. So
Yeah, I even put in on it to try to buy it. I didn't get it.
yeah.
And how'd you come up with that idea?
Well, I used to hunt rattlesnakes a lot, and so I was really, I don't know, I was just really into rats. Still am. I love snakes. So
Yeah, when you say you hunt them, you were hunting them to see them and enjoy them. And
yeah, well, there's one point which I still kind of feel guilty about, but I used to catch them and eat them, but it's because I didn't have that much money. So
yeah,
but but now I save them. If I see them on the road or anything, I'll get them off the road.
Yeah.
So yeah.
and so you start doing this kind of Hispanic culture, which you love, and I'd like to talk about. When did that become part of your life and interest?
It was always part of my life and interest because growing up in Albuquerque, and we used to go to Mexico a lot, and so I was always very interested in like Mexican culture and history and stuff, but I never even thought about painting it because, when you're young and stuff, you're influenced by, what's being done and what other artists are doing. And nobody was really doing, that stuff. And then all of a sudden I was, selling at the flea markets and stuff. And a friend of mine said, if you see any, he says, Mexican weavings are becoming the hot thing. If you see any of them for sale, or if you can get any of them, I'll buy them. So then first thing I did was I found one, and it was a pretty cool one. And so I think I paid $120 for it, and I sold it to him for $250. And I thought, why did I do that? I kind of liked it, and then I started, reading about them and collecting them. And then pretty soon I was collecting saltillos, and I really liked them. And then I started collecting sombreros, like good old sombreros. And then all of a sudden I thought I should paint this stuff. So that's when I started painting it.
And when did you start painting that?
It was, it would have been maybe early 90s, something like that. I can't even remember. I can't remember what the painting was or when I started, but I started painting that stuff back then sometime. And I remember when I did it, I put a piece in the CA show, and Joe Beeler came up to me and he said, John, he says, I really like that subject matter. He says, I've tried it, but you can't sell that stuff. And I thought, oh, great.
Was that before the opening of the show?
Yeah. And I said, oh, thanks, Joe. Yeah, I like painting it too. Well, that's good to know. So, but anyway,
Did you sell the piece?
Yeah, I sold a piece, and I've had really good luck selling that stuff. So I think, maybe I had a different take on it or a different look, or maybe Joe's timing was bad, but whatever. It's become one of my most popular subjects, and plus I love doing it. So.
And was that like 90 that you put that painting in? Would that have been like 96 or 7 or
what, the eagle and the snake?
No, the one that
oh geez, I think it was early. Oh yeah, it would have been. It was my first year. It was
96.
My first year showing. It was a painting called Cielito Lindon. It was a bunch of Mexican revolutionaries, in an interior scene, and one guy's playing the violin, and all these guys are around listening to them, loading their guns and getting ready for the next day. So.
Were you worried to do that? Because that's a Cowboy Artists of America, and it's not really.
No, I wasn't worried. I had fun doing it.
Yeah,
and,
you didn't ask your dad and say, "What do you think?"
No, I never. No,
I can see that. No, okay, yeah, you did what you wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and did you catch grief at all from other people, or surprise?
No, because that's part of the West.
Yeah,
so
I know, but I don't know if everybody knows that. Even the CA guys at that time.
No, the only comment was Joe. People liked it, so Joe said that, and he liked it. He just said you can't sell that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it's sold, but yeah.
Did you start to see other artists go, oh, maybe I should do this?
Yeah, it's like anything. It's I even to this day I see other guys, going down that road. So yeah.
Yeah, but you have something different than all of those guys, I think, probably. You have an innate and a really deep knowledge of Hispanic culture and their arts, including Saltillo Serapes.
Yeah.
And so when did you get that one that you bought and sold for $250? What year would have that been approximately?
Oh my gosh, I think that was late 80s,
Oh, yeah.
maybe 88, 89. I never wrote any of this stuff down, so I'm just remembering, but it was probably late 80s.
And what was that blanket that you sold for $250?
It was a really pretty one,
Was it like
I
a
only
late
had it
thing,
for
or
a few minutes,
do you remember what year it would have been? Kind of like it was a late classic kind of
it was
thing?
probably late. It was like late 1800s, but very fine. Had a beautiful diamond, because a lot of those weavings, even after the classic period, they're beautiful weavings. It's almost like a Mexican version of a Navajo Germantown. Like they took some of those commercial threads and stuff and started doing beautiful weavings that are just like a Germantown's a beautiful weaving, but it's different than a classic Navajo blanket. So.
Yeah, when did you get that first classic Saltillo? Do you remember that? You must.
Oh, yeah, I got 2 classics from you. Those were my first 2.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
An indigo one and a coaching one.
I remember the pieces. I had them for a while.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I helped with the addiction.
Yeah, because they've always been expensive, so I was able to trade for those. So, but if that's how I put my expensive collection together, is with a lot of trading and
And knowledge.
But because you just can't go out and buy them, they're so expensive. So.
And what's the most important thing that people should look for when they're buying? We're talking about class. These are blankets that are 1750 to 1850, more or less, right?
Yeah. Well, like anything, it's like you can have a Navajo blanket with great art in it, or you can have a Navajo blanket that's technically just as nice, but there's no art in it. And so we were just looking at 2 Saltillos this morning. One is like a technical masterpiece, but one's very simple, and the simple one has more art in it,
Mm-hmm.
So that I've always gravitated towards the beautiful pieces that have art in them. I don't know how else to describe it, but usually the minute you see them.
Mm-hmm.
So. Yeah.
And how many, if you want to share, how many Saltillos have you collected at this point?
Oh, I've collected lots of them, but I have sold and traded lots of them. But right now I probably have about 80 of them.
Yeah, and so that's one of the foremost collections in the world, right?
Well, it's right in there probably, yeah.
And at this point, with such a huge collection of very important textiles, are you trying to fill in holes, or do you just keep? It doesn't matter if it's great.
Well, right now I just want, first of all, you might only see one a year. I mean, they're so rare that and then you'll go through periods where you might see 5 in a month. But I haven't seen a really good one come on the market in quite a while. But
there's not that many out there, right?
No, but you see them come up for auction and stuff, and I'll look at them and think I'm not even going to go after that one, no matter how cheap it goes, because it's just, if it doesn't strike you, it doesn't strike you.
Yeah,
so.
That's you're buying because you love them,
Mm-hmm.
and you use them in your paintings.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a show together, which I thought was super successful,
Mm-hmm.
where we did Saltillos juxtaposed against your paintings.
Mm-hmm.
They're all your Saltillos, and you use them as a subject matter.
Yeah.
And that was a long time kind of thing you had wanted to do too. We had talked about it for years, right?
Yeah.
Tell me the audience a little bit about that, because we did a catalog too. They can get the catalog.
Yeah, and I it's I love using that kind of stuff in my paintings, because it just gives you another texture, and it makes your work more decorative and everything. Just having that stuff, and in your paintings. And I love, it's really cool when you can get a model that looks like an old time person, which is becoming more and more difficult to get. Those old looks because people are heavier now and but and they don't have like that weather worn skin and everything they used to have. But if you can get a good model and dress them with old clothes and old stuff, and it's exciting to see that, in person like this. Like, wow, that there's a serape being used how it's supposed to be used instead of this beautiful thing on the wall, which is great, but it's neat to see them, actually on a person. So,
yeah, and they would have been, right?
Yeah,
they would have been used
that's
as
that's what they're made for. So
see them on the back of a horse sometimes,
like a Navajo blanket. I mean, it's when you see a Navajo blanket on a Navajo with the weather-worn skin and the color of their skin against the colors of the blanket, and you say, oh, that's why they made those blankets that color and stuff, because it all complements each other. And one of the lessons I learned was up in Canada, they used to do a lot of orange beadwork, and I thought, why are they using all this orange beadwork? And it's just as ugly as orange. And so then, and the same with the Navajos. The minute they could use orange, they started putting orange in a lot of their blankets. But when you look at a Native American skin, it goes to the purples, especially out in the sun. And purple is the complement of orange. So when you actually put like that orange beadwork on a Native American or an orange blanket on a Navajo, it's like, wow, it really works. That's when it works, and so it's not just an orange blanket hanging on a wall. It's there's a reason they did that. So
it's the context,
or the complementary colors, yeah.
And it's got to be a little irritating when you see maybe a really great artist, but they just totally don't get the right blanket, the right horse, the right.
Yeah, it is, but it used to bug me more than it does now, and it's like, whatever, I just I have enough problems with myself, and so I just need to worry about myself. So,
very diplomatic. Good job.
Yeah.
And you learned a lot about sombreros too, right? I mean, you know a lot about sombreros.
Yeah, and you never can know enough, but I've tried to research stuff as much as I can, and I enjoy it. It's like, oh my gosh, if I had to research stuff that I don't enjoy, I'd probably go crazy. So,
have you ever thought about doing a book on your material? I mean, I know people have used your material for books, but have you thought about doing your own?
Oh, not really, because I don't even want to. I just want to paint, and if anything takes me away from the easel, then I just don't want. I always say I want to be selfish with my time, because at the end of your life, if you waste all your time doing something else, nobody's going to say, well, that was what you did was good with that time, but and so we're going to give it back to you at the end of your life so you can make those paintings you didn't have a chance to make. And like, that's how I look at it. I just want to paint. I don't want to waste time doing other stuff. So.
Do you look at that as like a legacy, what you're leaving?
No, I just want to paint. And there's so many, I don't have enough time to do all the ideas I have in my head. So
that's it. There's a zillion ideas that come to you on a regular basis. And some of them
all the time. Yeah. And I want to paint them. But I think you know me well enough. How did this like legacy? What does that mean? It's like just I don't even care about that. I just want to paint and do the best paintings I can do. So, and if good things happen, great. If not, I'm still painting. So,
well, I think you're doing some of your most exciting, interesting things I've seen, and I've known you 20 plus years, I think, by now. But like that positive, negative piece that you've done. Tell people what you're doing now, because you really kind of you're not a guy who's afraid to push the envelope and try different things. And I think you're doing some of that.
And
now.
I've never been afraid. I just if you get sometimes I get an idea and I think it's a brilliant idea, but it really isn't when you're looking back on some of my brilliant ideas. But it's it's just, it's so easy to paint for the market. I've known over the years, and you should always, in any of the arts, you should always, look to those that have, gone before you, and what did they do right and what mistakes did they make. And my favorite artists have always been the ones that paint for themselves. And so yeah, the part of the deal about learning how to paint and spending all these years practicing and working from life and doing this and that is to give you the ability to paint the ideas that you come up with. So when I was young, I'd come up with great ideas, but I didn't have the capability to paint them. So now, hopefully, after all these years, I can do stuff that, is different, that's, that I can do without worrying about, technique and this and that. Because when you're young, so much of your energy is going into drawing and technique and what's right and what's wrong, where you can almost feel when you turn that corner where it's like, how I just want to produce the best piece of art I can, and you don't have to worry about, is this paint too thick, is this paint too thin, should I do this, should I do that. You just have fun with it, and the technique will take care of itself. So
I think one of the coolest paintings you did, I really love it, is the one that's in the Scottsdale Museum of the West with the Coke can. Yeah, for those people who probably seen it, if you go, it's hanging. Still hanging now, actually. They took down every show and they left yours up.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and they put it in a big spot when you come into the
I've
building.
never even been in that museum.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Too bad.
It's fantastic. You'll love it. I highly encourage it.
Yeah.
It's where we're going to do that big Maynard Dixon show. Opening
cool.
in October. Yeah, over 100 pieces.
Have to go, yeah.
But tell me about that painting. I know it.
That one was, well, I did one called the Eagle Bone Whistle.
I remember that.
It was a great big head. And that was my first, I call them big head paintings. What else do you call them? That was my first big head painting I'd done, because I went to London and there was a show in the National Portrait Gallery of all these contemporary portrait paintings, and they were like these huge heads, but they were all like projected and painted over giclées and stuff. But the concept stuck with me. It's like, wow, big heads. Because when I went to art school and stuff, there was like formulas. When you paint a portrait, the head always has to be a little smaller than the person you're painting, or it looks like they have a big head. So then I thought, well, these guys have taken it into a whole another way of looking at it. So then I came home and I thought about it for a couple of years, and then I did the Eagle Bone Whistle, and I thought, wow, that was fun. So then I've been doing quite a few of those, and then I really love like Fritz Shoulder's work, and I love all that. But then I think how do I want to keep doing what I'm doing, but go more contemporary, because that's what I'm kind of gravitating to, because I like it. But then I thought the one thing, and it's not even a criticism, it's just in my head, what am I doing? But the one thing that I want to keep doing in my art is have good drawing, whether it's a big head, a little head, or very contemporary. I don't want to lose my drawing. You can exaggerate drawing, but I don't want to make mistakes in my drawing. So I exaggerate drawing and do all this stuff, but I don't want to lose my drawing. So I'm going in these different directions, but I'm trying to still keep, my foundation there. So
now there's another area that you paint, which you're exceptionally successful at, which is for those people who are watching this on YouTube, and you have this fantastic Hawaiian shirt on. Tell us about Hawaii and your love. I mean, because you have thousands of Hawaiian shirts. You just love Hawaii.
I've always, it's funny, I don't know why, when I was a little kid, my folks would go to Hawaii and they'd bring back Hawaiian shirts for us, and I've always loved Hawaiian shirts. So I've always worn them. And when I was going to art school, I'd sell at the flea markets on the weekend. I'd run around before I set up, and you could buy like really cool shirts for like a dime, a quarter. So I was always wearing Hawaiian shirts, and still do.
The one you have on, tell me about that.
Oh, this is a reproduction of an old one, but I have a good friend in Honolulu who makes great shirts, and he has the fabric done in
Mark
Japan.
Blackburn, right?
No.
Oh, it's different. Okay, he makes shirts too.
This is a Japanese guy.
Okay.
Yeah, his name's KC because nobody can pronounce his name, but he's a Japanese guy. He has the fabric done in Japan because they do the best rayon fabric, and then he brings the fabric back to Honolulu and has the shirts made there. So.
Yeah, and you've been doing paintings too. I mean, some of your paintings are just fantastic. The Hawaiian material.
We love painting in Hawaii. It's great to go over there when it's cold. Although now we live in California, so we don't have to worry about the cold. But when it was cold in Santa Fe, and the wind blowing and stuff, and we wanted to work from life, we'd go to Hawaii and paint there. So
yeah, you spend the whole time running around and doing plein air paintings, right?
Yeah.
Usually little watercolors, just because it's easier to bring them back.
Yeah, and plus we found that watercolor. We started taking watercolors to Europe because after 9/11 and everything, it was just easier. And then I realized pretty fast that watercolor, when you paint with watercolor, do 2 or 3 watercolors a day, every day for a month. When you get back, not only does it help your drawing, but it makes you look at your oil painting in a whole different way. So we find, at least I find, Terri can speak for herself, but I find that the watercolors help me so much with my studio work. So.
How does it make you look at your oils differently with the watercolors?
Well, it's just like it's kind of like you have to challenge yourself because it's a whole different approach. Like with watercolor, you start light and you go dark. And oil, that you usually start dark and go light. That's kind of the approach, although that's an oversimplification, but that's pretty much it. So with watercolor, and if watercolor, if you make a mistake in your drawing, you can't fix it. It's there. But oil, you can make a mistake and say, I'll go back and fix it later. So
it's faster too, right? I mean, you have to work fast with a watercolor brush, right?
You know what? And like when we paint in Venice and stuff, I can do an oil faster than a watercolor because when you're doing buildings and water and all this complicated stuff, you have to go very slow. You have to plan it out. You got to let different parts of the paper dry and paint over here. And so actually watercolors in a lot of cases are slower than oils from life.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite subject matter on the Hawaiian paintings that you like to paint?
Oh, I don't know. Is
there anything specific?
No, I like seascapes. I like it's all good. Yeah.
Calabash rolls.
Yeah.
Another problem you have.
Yeah.
We both have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to artists that are out there listening to this, starting out their career?
My best advice is don't become an artist. No.
I'm sure there's some truth into that in a weird way, right?
Unless you are ready if you have to be very thick-skinned. You can't let criticism bug you or it'll drive you crazy because everybody's critical. Everybody has an opinion, and you just you have to be true to yourself. But I guess the biggest thing is I mean, like I say, everybody has an opinion. It's like if you say, I'm going to start this business, I'm going to open a taco stand or something, and then you have all your relatives have their opinion on why you shouldn't open that taco stand. So and same with art, everybody has an opinion why you screwed up on that painting or you know what I mean. So you just have to be stubborn and selfish with your time and somewhat brave.
Yeah, I think you
Yeah.
are brave.
Yeah. Well,
I see it in your work. I see it in your subject matters you choose to paint, and how you're never afraid to move to that next kind of level of, I want to experiment with this, whether it's Hawaiian paintings that you might not be associated with, but you don't care and you do it because you
yeah,
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that's a good way. I think it's a good way to end this, actually, because I do think when I look in your paintings, there's always a unique voice. Well, those ideas are coming through. I can always be assured it's not going to be the same thing when I see one of John's, and Terri's for that matter, paintings, that you've got, you are selfish with your time and you spend it well.
yeah. Thank you.
Very good. And so you didn't even interview me. You said you were going to interview me. I said,
know.
you're not going to, buddy. You don't have a chance. I get to find out all the fun things, and I learn stuff.
Yeah.
John Moyers, you're a good friend,
Thank
an
you.
excellent artist. Thank you so much for coming on and talking today. I know you have other things to do, like go out and try to find some stuff at antique malls and go look at art. John will be looking at all my blankets now. He'll run in there because he just loves these things. Yeah. John Moyers, thank you so much.
Man Gallery, located for over 26 years in Tucson, Arizona, specializing in antique Native American art, early Western art, including the famed Maynard Dixon, as well as modern art. You can find everything online at medicinemangallery.com. There's over 6,000 objects to select from. Also, the Charles Bloom Murder Mystery Series, written by yours truly, me, Mark Sublette. There's 6 books in this series, and they follow the protagonist Charles Bloom through all the intrigue of the art world set in Santa Fe and the Navajo Nation. These can be found on Audible, ebooks, Amazon, and of course, the gallery at medicinemangallery.com.